Hello and welcome to English 1301 for the fall semester of 2020. This is going to be an unusual semester to say the least. Our university, our country, and the entire world is still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. All over campus you will see signs asking you to stay 6 feet apart, to always wear a mask. You'll see hand sanitizer stations. You'll see little pieces of plexiglass standing up in the classrooms. These are all attempts to keep students, faculty, and staff safe, to keep people from spreading the disease while they're on campus in face-to-face communication. And most importantly, attempts to keep our university functioning as close to normal as possible without serving to, just by bringing us all together, to spread the disease, which has at this point cost over 165,000 lives in the United States alone, and is currently on the rise here in Texas and especially here in Corpus Christi. Now, these measures, social distancing, wearing masks, using hand sanitizer, are designed to minimize contact between people, to prevent those who might have COVID-19 from passing the contagion on by coughing, by tiny particles, droplets that contain the virus that we might expel while talking, especially talking loudly. That's what the mask is primarily for. It's primarily to keep you from spreading it. It's to protect other people from you if you have it, even if you don't have symptoms and don't know you have it. It may provide some minimal protection to you if you're wearing it and someone is speaking to you without a mask. But these measures are primarily to guard against that, the small droplets that contain large numbers, large quantities of the virus. However, there is another way to transmit the virus, and that is when it becomes airborne through much smaller particles than the droplets. And the World Health Organization has, after much debate, apprised everyone that this is indeed a potential means of transmission of the virus. And it is one that hand sanitizer and masks and social distancing will not stop. This admission by the World Health Organization and the CDC and others comes after a large push by epidemiologists and environmental health scientists. This article in the journal Clinical Infectious Diseases, published back in July, was written by two environmental epidemiologists and signed by 239 other scientists, including epidemiologists and environmental disease researchers. And in it, these researchers wanted to encourage the scientific community to do more to both research and to make the public aware of the fact that the disease is very likely airborne, very likely being spread by particles smaller than those the surgical masks and hand sanitizer are designed to stop. The authors claim, and their signatories attest, that studies by the signatories and other scientists have demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that viruses are released during exhalation, talking, and coughing in microdroplets small enough to remain in the air and pose a risk of exposure at distances beyond 1 to 2 meters, that is the 6 feet that we've been warned to stay apart from each other. Several studies on previous SARS-related COVID viruses have shown that this indeed was the case with these other similar viruses. Also, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, which is called MERS, and as well as influenza, the flu, spread through microdroplets, the kind of thing that can escape through your mask on the sides and between the nose and the cheekbone, and remain in the air much longer than the droplets that we're taking precautions for right now. The precautions we're taking, like hand washing and social distancing, are appropriate, but in the view of these authors, they are insufficient to provide protection from virus-carrying respiratory microdroplets released in the air by infected people. The problem is especially acute in indoor or enclosed environments, particularly those that are crowded and have inadequate ventilation. And they believe that this explanation helps to explain why there are several super spreading events investigated which occurred under such conditions, even when the recommended precautions related to the direct droplet transmissions were being followed. In other words, even when people were doing what we as a university are doing right now. They warn that people may think that they're fully protected by adhering to the current recommendations, but in fact, additional airborne interventions are needed for further reduction of infection risk. And they specifically state students back to schools, colleges, and universities. So while we are taking some precaution, the precautions we're taking may be incomplete. And this is assuming that students are actually following the recommended precautions. This is Monday, August 17th. The first back to campus day is Wednesday, day after tomorrow. I was up at the university today looking at the classrooms and that sort of thing, and I saw quite a few people wearing either no mask at all, and this includes staff of the university, working at the university with university staff apparel on, sitting at desks on campus, not wearing any mask, inside with other people around. I saw people also wearing masks pulled down past their nose so that their nostrils are exposed. That's not wearing a mask at all. You might as well be wearing it on your elbow. So you're going to have to deal with the fact that many of your peers simply don't care if they spread the disease, and if you catch it, they don't care what ill health effects or even death they're passing along. But even when we're taking all the necessary precautions, such as wearing masks, we're only putting up part of a barrier. And a barrier doesn't work if it's not a complete barrier. But despite the threat level and the limited resources we have to combat it, Texas A&M University in Corpus Christi and the entire Texas A&M University system, as well as most other universities in the state of Texas, have been required to reopen completely with face-to-face classes. And this decision was made back in May, when Texas A&M system chancellor John Sharp instructed all of the presidents of all the universities, including our president, to have the campus open and operational. And he concluded that call famously now, or infamously, with the command, "Make this happen." Now, there are many reasons for this decision. Many of them are political, many of them are financial. Universities require tuition to function. That's because for the last 4 decades, university budgets have been cut, forcing the university to operate like a business rather than like a public service, which it was once considered to be, which universities were considered to be for centuries. Now, we are not a for-profit business, but we require tuition in order to operate. But that also presents a conflict of interest when it comes to things like opening the campus in the middle of a pandemic. Now, a conflict of interest is not to say that people are lying to you. It does mean that people are engaged consciously or unconsciously in what's called motivated reasoning. In motivated reasoning, we start with a conclusion and we sort of cobble together selected evidence and sometimes fallacious premises to reach that pre-selected conclusion for the purposes of convincing others to accept it. In a composition class, our first goal is to find the most accurate conclusion by using critical reasoning instead of motivated reasoning. Only after we have evaluated all available data and the premises that connect that data to the conclusion can we formulate our conclusions in writing or other means of communication. And even then, we have to remain open to ongoing research and peer review, which may require us to change our conclusions or at least add qualifications that allow for contingencies. Now, I'm seeing, and you're going to see, a lot of claims from non-scientific authorities that do not meet the criteria of critical, qualified, and evidence-based arguments that you will learn to write in this class. I'm seeing a lot of paltering. Paltering is a sort of vague generalization that lets you infer specific claims, but if you review the claim, you realize they didn't make a claim that was that specific. So saying that we are taking all available measures to ensure your safety is not the same thing as saying that you are safe. But people tend to assume when they see hand sanitizer stations and everyone wearing masks and signs that say social distancing and little pieces of plexiglass in front of desks, they may infer that they are safe with the university not actually making the statement that you are safe. You're going to see a lot of platitudes, vague statements that have more to do with emotion than they do with specific data. You're going to see a lot of false dichotomies like, we have to choose between safety or education, when in fact you don't have to choose between safety and education, especially when we have the capability of having a course entirely online. There are going to be a lot of false equivalences, like the COVID-19 is just like the flu, and everybody's going to get sick sometime, so just get over it, this sort of thing. And you're going to see the total avoidance of specific data, such as the fact that Corpus Christi has seen an extreme rise in cases of COVID weeks after the decision was made to reopen. And despite these rise in cases, even though the university has not officially opened yet, we're still 2 days out at the time that I collected this data from the City of Corpus Christi's Coronavirus Task Force. And even though most students are not yet back on campus, we're already seeing massive increases in the number of COVID cases. And that's very likely to increase exponentially once we have people coming in from all over the state and even all over the nation and sharing small airspaces. Chancellor Sharp's demand that we open all A&M campuses was made back in May, at the very beginning of May, when COVID was a national problem, but it wasn't as big a problem here in Texas, and especially not here in Corpus Christi. Now, if you look at the red line at the bottom of this chart, you see the number of deaths, and compared to the number of cases, it looks very small. Of course, nationally, we're over 160,000 deaths from COVID since it began back in January. But it can seem safer than it really is when we look at how small this red line is on this chart. But this is to ignore the fact that death is not the only negative outcome of this disease. Obviously, there is a problem. There is time off work. There is discomfort while you have a disease like this. But COVID also leaves people with permanent health effects. It can cause blood clotting, damage, and scarring inside the lungs, and that scarring does not go away, ever. You can try to improve your cardiovascular health after that so that the rest of your lung is able to function at normal capacity or maybe higher than normal capacity. But that area that you lose from scarring, it never heals. COVID causes similar problems by creating heart conditions. It can cause kidney damage and potentially kidney failure. And perhaps scariest at all, it can cause brain damage. Patients have demonstrated symptoms such as delirium, brain inflammation, stroke, and nerve damage, even when they didn't show respiratory symptoms. They weren't coughing, they weren't feeling sick. And cognitive decline is not what we want to find when we come to college. Because of factors like these, the majority of the faculty here, as well as at other A&M system schools, have submitted multiple requests, both to our university presidents, but also to Chancellor Sharp, to at least allow the faculty to conduct the classes in the way that they think their class can best be handled. Some classes don't work well online, but others can work just fine. Past letters from the faculty have been met with more vague language, more rhetoric about the steps the university is taking to reduce the spread, more rhetoric that bears all the marks of motivated reasoning rather than critical reasoning. The rhetoric usually invokes the student. It says something like, students want the college experience. Now, as a student at a university, there are a lot of things involved in the college experience. The actually sitting in the classroom may not be at the top of your list for ideal college experiences. And no matter what, you're not going to get a normal college experience. The social distancing guidelines impose certain requirements, and for us to have a functional face-to-face class, we will have to do all of the following. We will have to alternate attendance. Each of these composition classes has 20 students, and the room that we're assigned only has 9 available desks with computers. Now, that means it's a 3-day-a-week class, so that means I have to divide us up into groups of 7, 7, and 6. Meaning that you'll be assigned either Monday, Wednesday, or Friday to come to class, and you wouldn't be able to come to class on the other 2 days. If you're not able to come to class, then you would have to log in for a WebEx meeting. That would be a synchronous meeting, which means that you would have to log in on time, and if you got knocked offline, you would miss whatever I said, whatever happened in that amount of time. If we have bandwidth issues, you're going to miss a lot. And I would have to make my lecture and the class discussion available to you by wearing a lavalier microphone, which is a microphone that someone in the class immediately before had worn right next to their mouth. I would have to find a way to clean this without, getting it wet and damaging it. By the way, the lavalier microphones have not yet been installed in our classroom, nor have the cameras that would be necessary for you to see me and the slideshow. Or I would have to have a screen share instead of a slideshow behind me instead of using the camera. All of this would have to go out without any technical problems. And those of us in the classroom would have to sanitize all surfaces in the classroom in under 5 minutes. That is, the 5 minutes before class starts and the 5 minutes immediately after class is over, which means the people in the classroom and anyone online would not be able to ask me follow-up questions after class. So we as a class can try to meet all of these criteria that have so far never been even attempted before, and try to make the usual college experience out of that, as well as I would have to deliver the content, the intellectual content of the class in that amount of time. Or, and here's another option, you could just watch everything on YouTube. I've taught this class before as a fully online class multiple times. All of the lectures are already posted on YouTube and integrated in Blackboard. All of the assignments, including the peer review assignments that you would accomplish in class, are all also integrated in Blackboard. You could either do them in the classroom at the computer there, but it's equally possible to do them from anywhere. You can log into Blackboard. And all of the quizzes and the essays are all submitted through Blackboard as well. Watching the lectures on YouTube would mean it would be asynchronous, meaning that if you got knocked offline or just didn't have very good reception, you could watch the lecture at a different time. As long as you met the deadlines will be corresponding to the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday classes at the normal class time. If you can do all of that remotely, there's really no reason to show up for class. So even though this is not officially a fully online class, I'm making attendance completely optional. So I don't want there to be any confusion about this. Attendance in my English 1301 is not required and not encouraged. Now, I want to be very clear that that's just for my class because I have all of this material already posted online, and it's just for while we are on lockdown. Now, that will be for the entire fall 2020 semester. If you're watching this video at a different time, it's going to depend on whether or not we are still dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, that is not to say that there's nothing that you could get in a face-to-face class you can't also get online. Class discussion is very helpful for coming up with ideas about what to research, getting peer review on the spot through discussion. When you have a certain idea and you can't see any other alternative to that until someone else brings up something you didn't know anything about. Class discussion is very productive when we have 20 students all sitting together talking about the same issue. But even if we all meet under the established social distancing rules, there's only going to be a maximum of 9 people in the classroom at a time. It's not clear how well other people will be able to communicate through WebEx over the speakers, much less how well they're going to be able to hear other students through my lavalier. The lavalier is only designed to pick up sound at a very close range. So there are some trade-offs. In a normal semester, it would be great if we had everybody there. But under the circumstances, given the technical restraints we're under, but also the health risks, there is no reason to show up to class. So what does that mean for people who want to show up for class? Well, I'm going to make face-to-face attendance optional and supplemental. That means that if you wish to attend class face-to-face, I will be there on Wednesday and on Friday of the first week. And if there are a few people who want to do this 3 times a week, then we can do that. But those who do not come to class will not be missing anything. The assignments will still be completed online, even if you're in the classroom. It'll be done in the computer lab there. Online lectures will need to be viewed before the class, so there's not going to be any element of lecture there that's not also available offline. We can do that if you want. But if no one wants to attend the face-to-face classes, the face-to-face classes will be canceled and replaced by additional online office hours. In that case, I will be available via WebEx, so you can still ask me direct questions and get immediate feedback without having to type out an email or anything like that. If multiple people log in at the same time, you can talk with each other. That will allow people in both sections of 1301 to talk to each other, as well as to me. But I can only do that if both sections decide to not have face-to-face classes. And so I'm going to leave that to you, the students. Now, there is another point of confusion that has nothing to do with the pandemic, and that is you will frequently see in the video lectures and occasionally maybe in other parts of Blackboard and the assignments and that sort of thing, a reference to English 1302. And you may think, oh, this is from the wrong class. I'm having to do something that's either not part of 1301 or I'm being asked to do something that is more advanced than what this class is supposed to be. That's not actually the case. The confusion comes from the history of English 1301 and 1302 over the past few years. When I first started teaching at Texas A&M Corpus Christi in the fall of 2014, we had two composition classes, in English 1301 and English 1302. But in 2016, one of those classes was the university administration decided to take one of those classes away from the core curriculum and have students instead take communications class. So students were only taking, as part of the core curriculum, one English composition class. So we combined the two. So we combined the most important elements of the two classes into one class, which was English 1302. That was the case from 2016 until this semester. But now the Texas A&M Board of Regents has told us that we cannot have a 1302 class unless we also have a 1301 class. So we have once again divided these classes. So I made all of my lecture videos for the online class when it was a combined 1302 class. It's the same content that's now been taken out of 1302 and put in 1301. So that's why you're going to see 1302. This is not actually the same thing that you'll be doing in the next 1302. If you were to go on to 1302, you would see different content, different requirements, although you would still need to know these concepts. So here's what we want to get out of 1301. What are the goals of English composition? You may already have some idea. People usually assume, okay, this is where I'm going to learn to persuade people to believe what I believe. I'm going to find a conclusion and I'm going to convince other people that it's a good conclusion. I'm going to find evidence to support my belief and disprove the beliefs of others. And then I'm going to write a paper. And in that paper, I'm going to make an argument and win that argument. Those assumptions are common enough, but those are not our goals. In fact, those are the exact opposite of what we want to do here. We're not just looking to persuade people to believe what we already believe. Instead, we have to ask ourselves, is what we believe actually accurate? And if I already have a conclusion, that's actually a disadvantage. That's going to blind me to some of the data. It's going to blind me to some of the fallacious reasoning I might be depending on. So the first thing I need to be able to do is distinguish between the natural motivated reasoning, where I just want to convince you of what I already believe and not question what I already believe, and critical reasoning. And critical reasoning is not what a lot of people seem to think it is. When people say, I'm good at critical reasoning because I can critically evaluate somebody else's argument. I can critically evaluate things that I don't believe. That's not critical reasoning. That's motivated reasoning. If anything, it's disconfirmation bias. I'm biased toward disconfirming something that is unfamiliar to me. Critical reasoning is when you are willing to critically evaluate your own assumptions, to look for ways that you might actually be wrong, to deliberately look for ways that you might be wrong. That is not natural, it's not intuitive, and it's not easy, but we're going to learn to do that. You're also not just looking for evidence to support your belief, that's confirmation bias. You want to learn to identify and evaluate the structure of an argument. You want to be able to do research to find data, but then you want to see what steps are necessary to get from that data to the conclusion I think that data warrants. You're going to do that by evaluating other people's arguments, but you're also going to go through a process where you identify the steps that you use in your argument to get from the data to the conclusion. And that process is not writing a paper. A paper, for one thing, you're not going to print anything out on dead trees. So there's no actual paper here. And when people use the word paper, they're usually just talking about an assignment. The goal of college is not to teach you to do assignments that are only going to be presented to you in college. So writing a paper might be relevant if you end up writing an interdepartmental memo at a business you work at later on, but the essay is not a paper. The essay is a process. I'm going to really get into this in the next couple of weeks, but it is a testing process in which we get our thoughts onto paper or onto a computer screen, and then we say, hey, is that a justifiable premise? Is that data accurate? Is there more I can do? You need to get your ideas out of your head and onto some external format so that you can critically evaluate it. That's what the essay process is. And the goal of writing that essay is not to win an argument. Winning an argument implies that if you win, somebody else loses. And that's not the kind of argument we're going to deal with at all. Even if you have a totally logical argument that's based on all available data, you may find that when you take that data and that logic to someone who is opposed to that conclusion, that all the logic and all the data just don't matter at all, because there are problems like what's called the backfire effect. When people feel like they're being attacked personally, they're going to lock up. They're going to double down on a belief that might be totally and obviously wrong, but telling them that it's wrong won't work, won't change their mind at all. So we have to find ways to communicate with people who have negative emotional reactions even after we have a solid data-based and logical argument. So these are our real goals for this composition class. Now, most people tend to think that they're really good at this already. Hey, I think logically. I just look at all the data. I can admit when I'm wrong. I just never have to because I'm never wrong. This is the beginning of a confirmation bias. This is the beginning of motivated reasoning. Motivated reasoning starts before we're consciously aware of it, especially when we're thinking of ourselves and trying to associate ourselves with good terms and good ideas rather than bad ideas. And motivated reasoning seems to be a negative thing, so I don't want to be associated with it. So I want to be associated with critical reasoning, so I'm motivated to call myself a critical reasoner. Well, it's already started. We're going to see this image a lot during this semester. The psychologist Jonathan Haidt compares the way the mind works to a lawyer riding on the back of an elephant. Now, the elephant represents intuitive cognition. That is, the processes that are going on in your mind all the time, even those that you're not aware of. And there's a lot you're not aware of. You jump to conclusions without necessarily knowing where those conclusions came from. These conclusions are prejudgments. In other words, judgments that you come to before you look at the pros and cons of that judgment. That is the root of the word prejudice, prejudgment. And the lawyer, in Haidt's description, is the conscious mind. The conscious mind could use critical reasoning to rethink those automatic assumptions, those prejudices, but usually the reflective consciousness actually just tries to justify that intuitive assumption. It tends to be motivated to look around, cobble together evidence that leads to that foregone conclusion. And that metaphor helps us to understand the conclusions that have been arrived at independently in many of the human sciences over the past few decades, whether it's behavioral economics, anthropology, evolutionary psychology, sociology. We'll even come across some artificial intelligence theorists talking about how the human mind versus the computer mind work as well. So this coincides with a lot of recent research, but it's not a new idea. This understanding that we're not very good at critical reasoning is something that goes back at least to the Greek philosopher Socrates. Socrates famously was told by the oracle at Delphi that he was the wisest man in Athens. And rather than saying, hey, that's pretty awesome, I'm awesome, instead he said, hey, wait a second, I don't think I know that much. I need to go educate myself. So he went around talking to all the experts in all the fields that he could think of. And it was then that he, instead of coming away with conclusions, he came up with questions. And those questions made him wiser. He questioned everything, including starting with himself. Now, questioning authority doesn't always end well, and Socrates was put to death for insubordination to the Athenian government and corrupting the youth that were his students. But one of those students, Plato, went on to found the first university, the Academy in Athens. And it's in that tradition that we're going to take our inspiration. So, okay, how's this going to work? This class is designed around the inquiry process. You're going to learn a lot of concepts about motivated and critical reasoning in the first few weeks. You're going to take quizzes about that. You're going to do peer review assignments where you and a classmate will evaluate arguments, then comment on each other's evaluations of those arguments and that sort of thing. Eventually, you're going to write a series of essays, and each one of those essays will build on the previous one. That doesn't mean you're just revising the essay each time. Each essay is going to have different requirements, different criteria, but the work you do for one will be relevant to the next one. You'll be able to build on what you've done already, rather than writing an essay about one topic and then switching and writing about another topic. As I mentioned, our interaction is going to be entirely on Blackboard. That would be the case even if we were meeting in a classroom. The reason these classes are conducted in computer labs is because a writing class, you need to be able to write. It also makes it easier to administer quizzes and that sort of thing. To get to Blackboard, you type in bb9.tamucc.edu, then log in with your university screen name and password. The first page you're going to see when you log in is the schedule. The first 7 weeks of the schedule are complete. I'll be filling in the rest of it over the next few days. It's here you learn what is due on what days. So with the exception of the first day, Wednesday, all of the assignments and the readings and that sort of thing will be due by your normal class time on that day. So for Wednesday, watch this video and read over the syllabus in the menu on the left. The syllabus starts off like this. It has my personal information. I've taken the personal information out here because this is on YouTube. But it has contact information for me. In particular, it has the WebEx address that you'll need to use if you want to meet with me during office hours. If you're not sure how to use WebEx, there's a link just below that, 4 links down, that says WebEx meeting. That will take you to a link where you can download the WebEx software. Then you enter my WebEx address into that WebEx software and it will connect you with me. It helps if you have a camera, but even if you don't, you can I'll at least be able to hear you and respond. The office and the telephone number are not really going to be useful this semester because I will not be in my office. The air conditioner situation in my office building is not ideal for avoiding the transmission of COVID-19. Further down on the syllabus, you'll see the textbook requirement. Only one textbook is required for this class. That is the book Naming What We Know. You can find it at the university bookstore. You can also order it through the university bookstore as a paperback, but you can also get an ebook. You can also get that ebook through Amazon, as far as I know. The syllabus also lists other requirements, like you have to have access to the university network, active Islander email account, and access to Blackboard. There's a link for WebEx software. You're going to need a word processor for your essays. Microsoft Word is already available to you, even if you don't have it. The whole Microsoft Office 365 is available to all students for free, or well, it's enrolled. It's part of your tuition anyway. And you can get it by going to the address link there. Also below that, you have your grade distribution. This is where your grade comes from. These are the different assignments, when they're due and what they're worth. I'll go over those independently in just a minute. First, I want to go back to the schedule so that you understand how the schedule works. The schedule, as well as telling you when things are due, it will also give you links to the majority of it. So like I said, you only have to have one textbook. It's relatively inexpensive, but most of the readings we're going to do in this class are online. They're articles that are posted online, and the links will be built into the schedule. I've also got the links to the lectures on YouTube, as well as the dates that the quizzes are due, and they're going to be due at the end of the class time for your section, as well as when peer review assignments are due. And I'll go over those independently in just a second. First, the YouTube lectures. Like I said, all my lectures are already on YouTube. They all say 1302, but don't let that distract you. They're all part of the 1301 class now that we've redistributed the elements of what used to be one class into 2 classes. But don't let the fact that it's on YouTube fool you or make you feel like it's going to be a piece of cake. Treat this like a lecture. You're going to want to take notes. I encourage you to use a paper notebook to write your notes. Studies have shown that when you have to actually write something down as opposed to type it in, that you're much more likely to remember what you've written down, even when you don't have access to your notes later. There's going to be a lot of information on the screen. But I will call your attention to the terms you definitely need to know, and you definitely need to incorporate in your notes by putting them in red. They're going to be a red font. So if you see something that's a red font, you're going to want to know what that term means later on. An advantage to YouTube is you can pause and go back and repeat, But another advantage of YouTube is you can speed me up. Wouldn't it be nice if you could speed up face-to-face classes to 1.5 times the normal speed, and a 50-minute class could be done in 35 minutes? Then there are the readings. The readings are also listed in the schedule at the time they're due. These will take you to periodicals that are online, but some of them might be paywalled. For example, if you tried to go to the article We Are All Confident Idiots by David Dunning, which you'll need to read for next week, and you click around lots of different articles on the Pacific Standard, it might tell you that you have a limit of 5 articles that you can read on the Pacific Standard for the month. And if you exhaust your limit on any of these periodicals, and when it comes time to actually read the text, you can't get access to it, you can usually just use another browser. For instance, if you use Firefox most of the time, you can switch over to Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome or Safari, and the count will start all over again because it's a slightly different ISP. If all that fails, you can always use a computer on campus or somebody else's computer or your phone. But if you can't get access to the article by any means, be sure to let me know, and I'll be sure to help you figure out a way to get access to that article again. Now, some of the articles that are assigned are not available online. Some of them are included on Blackboard. So if you see that little BB blue link, that means that it's a document, usually a PDF document that's on Blackboard. When you click that, it should open that Adobe Acrobat document in your browser, or if you have the Adobe Acrobat Reader, which is free. But also, I believe at this point, you have the full version of Acrobat available. Either way, I recommend opening it in the application Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader, because that will allow you to highlight. Other readings might be in Naming What We Know, the only textbook that's assigned, and in that case, the number there doesn't refer to the page; it refers to the article. There are, I believe 5 chapters, and they each have, several sections. So, if Naming What We Know 3.3 would be listed as NWWK 3.3, and you would just go to Chapter 3, Article 3. The quizzes you will see with a blue highlight, and anytime you see a quiz there, there will probably not be a link there. You will have to go to the quizzes section on the left. Now, in the syllabus, I give a longer description of how the quizzes work, what they're for. When you go to the quizzes section, you'll see whichever quiz is active at that time. There's usually only going to be one. To begin the quiz, first you click on the name, the title, just quiz 1. That will take you to this page. You haven't actually begun the quiz yet until you click the begin button. The quizzes will usually be 10 minutes long, and there'll usually be 10 questions to answer in that time. You can use your notes. I allow my face-to-face classes to use their handwritten notes. But it's not going to be the kind of thing that you can just do a text search on, because you're going to spend more time searching. If you don't already know what I'm asking and how it relates to the other material, text search is probably not going to help you answer the question. The goal of the quiz is not so much to, catch you having done the work or not. It's more to sort of call your attention to what you need to know by now. With that in mind, I will drop 2 quizzes worth. This is something I do in face-to-face classes. I usually give students 2 unexcused absences with no penalty. And if they happen to have those absences on days when there's a quiz, then I don't want that to count against them. So I will do the same thing here. I will drop 2 quizzes worth of questions. And if each quiz is worth 10 questions, that means I'll drop 20 questions worth. And if you take all the quizzes, I will still drop 20 questions worth. Let's say on 4 quizzes, you only get 5 out of 10 on each one. That will mean the total of 20 questions you missed. I will drop that 20 questions. Because again, the purpose of the quiz is formative, is to help your research, to help your learning, rather than summative. In other words, to gauge what you know and have that be the end of it. You want to be sure that you have a secure internet connection when you begin the quiz. Once the quiz starts, once you click begin, the timer is going to start, and that timer is going to continue to go whether or not you're online. If you get knocked offline, if you close your browser, whatever happens, that timer is still going, and once time is up, that's it. You can't retake it. So be sure that you have a secure internet connection and that you're not going to be disturbed, that somebody's not going to come in and try to start talking to you or whatever. Okay, back to the schedule. The assignments in green are peer review assignments. And each of these has two parts. They're going to see peer review assignment number 1 listed twice. You're going to see all the other peer reviews listed twice. That's because there's 2 stages to a peer review. To do the peer review, to begin the peer review, go to the peer review section on the menu on the left. That's going to show you the date that the submission is due, that is the first part, as well as the date that the evaluation, the peer evaluation is due. So the first part is going to be you doing the assignment, and then there's going to be some time where you grade and comment on someone else's submission. To begin whichever stage you're in, to begin that, click on View/Complete Assignment. Then it's kind of confusing because you may not see anything there. You're going to click on the words question 1. That doesn't even look like a link, but it is. That's how you answer question 1. Now, after you submit the first part, then the next time you click on View/Complete Assignment, you're going to see this. You're going to see a classmate's name, or you're going to see the names of 2 classmates, or it may just say user 1 and user 2. That depends on if I make it anonymous or not. And you begin the review process by clicking on the name, or even if it just says user 1, user 2. If you see the comment click through for each question, I've added that text to this screen because it's something people frequently overlook. But we're up there where it says questions 1 of 4. You have to click on question 1, read your peer submission, and below your peer submission, you'll see my criteria to use when evaluating your peer, and then you'll type in your comments below. You need to actually give commentary. This is the most important part of the peer review, not how many points you give your peers. I'm actually going to give everybody who does the peer review assignment full credit. So you can give them however many points. The important purpose of the assignment is to get feedback on your comments. Getting feedback helps, and giving feedback helps. You might not have understood something when you first did your own submission, but then it clicks when you read the criteria, and all of a sudden you understand it in a way you didn't before. That's the goal of the assignment. This is sort of a guided discussion between you and your classmates. But once you do that for the first question, be sure you then click on the number 2 and do the same thing. Click on number 3 for question 3, do the same thing. Click on 4 for question 4. Don't overlook those, otherwise it's just going to show up blank once you submit that peer review. If you forget all this, the instructions are posted also in the syllabus. And in the syllabus, I also describe the structure of all the writing assignments. So besides the quizzes and the peer reviews, the majority of your grade is going to come from the essays that you write. And each essay is part of a research project. This research project will not be simply expository. In other words, you're not just going to look at a topic and gather a bunch of information about that and then write a report about it. An essay is not a report. You're going to need to find an issue. That is something that is not a problem that needs to be solved, or something that's up in the air, something that's controversial. You're going to investigate that. You might already have some idea of what you want your conclusion to be, but you don't have to. And in fact, if you don't, that actually puts you in a better position to be more objective. But it should be something you're interested in. A question you want to find an answer to, or something that other people think differently than you about, that you want to find out, well, what's up with these people and how do I convince them that I'm right? That's a fine place to begin that process, but you always want to keep an open mind that you might be wrong about that. But it should be something that's interesting enough for you to keep doing the same research on the same issue throughout the semester. Once you know what that is, you're going to write a research proposal. That's going to be part of a peer review assignment. You're going to get feedback from other people on that proposal. And then you're going to start the process with Essay 1. Essay 1 is going to be rhetorical evaluation. You're going to look at someone else's argument, that is an article that's posted in a periodical, or a speech, or some other place where someone makes an argument. And you're going to evaluate that argument according to the data it presents, also the premises that link that data to the conclusion. You're going to be evaluating it in an essay of your own. You're not going to be at that point putting forward your own conclusion about the larger issue yet. It's in the second essay that you're going to put forward your own argument that leads to your own conclusion. In the third essay, you're actually going to do something a little counterintuitive. You're going to propose a way to revise your second essay. Your audience for this would be the would be people that agreed with you about your conclusion, but might be going about it in the wrong way. This will make a little bit more sense once we talk about things like the backfire effect and that sort of thing after you submit Essay 2. But Essay 3 is a proposal about how to change the rhetoric, change the communication style of your second essay. And then the final revision will be a revision of the second essay that follows the instructions you laid out in your third essay. All of these essays are going to be submitted on Blackboard. You're going to click on the Essays section on the left. When you do that, you'll see the instructions for each individual essay. Again, to submit that particular essay, click on the title, in this case, Essay 1, Rhetorical Analysis. You'll see this screen. You'll need to upload a document that is either in Microsoft Word format or in Adobe PDF format. You'll see the Safe Assign waiver there. You need to check that box. That basically just says that you give your permission for this plagiarism testing site to internally store your intellectual property. That does not publish anything you've done. All it does is allow the Safe Assign system to store that text to make sure that no one else turns it in as their own later on. For example, if your roommate got on your computer and took your essay and took this class next semester and turned it in, that would allow Safe Assign to catch it. Safe Assign will not publish, it will not make available to the public what you've written. You can see brief descriptions of each individual essay in the syllabus. For longer explanations of each one, click on the Essays tab. These might change a little bit because we're adapting the 1302 class into both the 1301 and 1302. So I might do some slight changes to some of the later essays later in the semester. But I will definitely let you know. I will definitely make that announcement if that is the case. So this process, this essay writing process that starts with looking at how motivated and critical reasoning work, then starts into the research process, the rhetorical evaluation, and that sort of thing. Everything builds on something else. It incorporates peer review through the peer review assignments. Obviously, I'm going to be making comments on your essays after you turn them in, as well as grading them. But all of this is an introduction to the essay writing process as a means not just of persuading somebody to adopt a conclusion, but to look at your own thinking, to do your own research, get it outside your head onto an external surface so that you could then critically evaluate it, allow other people to critically evaluate it, and actually improve the conclusion, improve the qualifications. Make sure you have all the necessary sources, all the necessary data. And to be sure that you're doing the critical thinking process instead of what comes naturally, which is motivated reasoning. That's English 1301. I will send you an announcement every week to let you know what's coming up that week. Everything, at least for the next few weeks, is already on the schedule. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me or attend my office hours through WebEx. You can even coordinate with some of your classmates if you know them, and all log in at the same time, and we can have group meetings through WebEx. But despite all of the unusual nature of this semester and the real physical and health dangers that we're all dealing with, I think we're all lucky that I've already got the material set up for a completely online version of this class. I'm completely willing to work with anyone who just cannot function in an online class and needs to have some face-to-face interaction. But I want us to be able to minimize personal contact. I want us to be able to minimize the time we spend in an enclosed airspace where we might transmit or receive a virus that we know is airborne. There are going to be a lot of problems to solve. I believe we can solve them. There will inevitably be a lot of cases of COVID-19 here on campus, and that may be you. If you become sick and you can't complete assignments on time, let me know. We can figure out a way to work through that. There are definitely going to be challenges for all of us. For me, pedagogically, as an instructor, and of course for you, having to do the work that you have to do for this and other classes, all while trying to stay healthy. I'm willing to work with you as much as I possibly can to help you stay safe, but also to develop the skills that are going to be necessary not just for this class, but in every class you take in college and in your professional career as someone who specializes in analyzing, evaluating, and communicating critical and accurate information.